I'm Anita, standing in the middle of the county courthouse's conference room, the air thick with tension. I can still hear the gavel strike the podium. Sold to the woman in the back for $600,000. The words echo in my ears, and I look across the room at Valerie. Her face is a mess, mascara running down her cheeks as she sobs uncontrollably. Derek, her husband, has already slipped out the door, not even bothering to look back. It's hard to believe that just a few moments ago, I was sitting in the back row, watching as the auction for my childhood home unfolded. The room was filled with real estate investors, a young couple, and a businesswoman, all vying for the property. Valerie, on the other hand, sat in the front row, her shoulders slumped and her face pale. I knew she was in trouble, but I never thought it would come to this. As I think back on the past 5 years, a flood of memories washes over me. It all started on a cold, rainy day at my parents' funeral. My parents, Edward and Isabella Roberts, were kind, loving people who had adopted me as an infant. They had raised me with love and care, never once making me feel like I was any less than their biological daughter. Valerie, however, was a different story. She was my older sister, 6 years my senior, and had always been the golden child in our family. She had perfect grades, perfect looks, and a perfect life, or so it seemed. Since I could remember, Valerie had always made me feel like an outsider. Whenever our parents weren't looking, she would lean in close and whisper, "You're not really one of us, you know. They just felt sorry for you." I tried to ignore her, telling myself that she didn't mean it, but deep down I knew the truth. She resented me for being adopted, and she had never truly accepted me as her sister. At the funeral, Valerie's true colors were finally revealed. As I stood near the twin caskets, my hands shaking and my heart breaking, Valerie walked up to me and tossed a bank card onto the counter. "Here," she said, her voice cold and bitter. "Consider this charity for the adopted one." I stared at the card in shock, my mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. Before I could say a word, Valerie continued, "You have 24 hours to move out. This is my house now, and I don't have to let you stay here." I felt a lump form in my throat as I looked at her. "Valerie, please," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "I have nowhere to go." She just shrugged and turned away. "That's not my problem," she said. "You should have thought about that before." With that, she walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my grief. Over the next few days, I tried to reach out to my relatives, hoping that someone would take me in. But every time I called, I was met with the same response. "Oh, sweetie, we'd love to help, but we don't want to get involved in family disputes," they would say. "Valerie said you were being difficult about the inheritance. Maybe you should just accept what your parents decided." I felt so alone and betrayed. How could they believe Valerie's lies? Didn't they know how much I loved my parents? Didn't they know how much I had lost? In the end, I had no choice but to leave the only home I had ever known. I packed my things into a suitcase and a trash bag, and I walked out of the house with tears streaming down my face. As I stood on the driveway, I looked back at the house, memories of my childhood flooding back. I remembered the smell of my mother's cooking, the sound of my father's laughter, and the feeling of safety and love that I had always felt there. And I knew that I would never be able to go back. For the next 5 years, I struggled to make ends meet. I worked 2 jobs, one at a coffee shop and the other at a restaurant, just to pay the rent and buy food. I lived in a tiny studio apartment in a part of town that I had never known existed, surrounded by people who didn't care about me. I ate instant noodles and slept on a thin mattress, and I dreamed of the day when I would be able to change my life. But no matter how hard I worked, I could never seem to get ahead. I was always one step behind, always struggling to keep up. And in the back of my mind, I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if I had just opened that bank card. Maybe it would have been the answer to all my problems. Maybe it would have changed everything. But every time I thought about it, I would hear Valerie's voice in my head. "Probably empty," she would say.
À participation trophy.
And I would push the thought away, telling myself that it was better not to know. Then one day, everything changed. I was at work, cleaning the espresso machine when my coworker, Lily, ran into the back room, out of breath. "Anita," You need to see this, she said, shoving her phone at me. I looked at the screen and saw a real estate listing website showing properties scheduled for foreclosure auction. And there, in the middle of the screen, was my childhood home. I stared at the screen in shock, my mind racing. How could this be? Valerie had inherited everything. The house, the savings, the investments. How could she possibly have lost it all in 5 years? I scrolled through the listing, my heart sinking with each word. Foreclosure, due to mortgage default. Outstanding debt, $400,000. Auction date, 2 weeks from now. I felt a sense of panic wash over me. I couldn't let my childhood home be sold to strangers. I couldn't let Valerie win. That night, I sat in front of my nightstand, my hands shaking as I stared at the drawer. The bank card was still in there, untouched for 5 years. And for the first time in a long time, I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I walked into the First National Bank, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew that I had to find out the truth. A woman at the service desk waved me over. Her name tag read Amanda Davis. "How can I help you today?" she asked, smiling politely. I took a deep breath and placed the card on the counter. "I'd like to cancel this card, please," I said, my voice trembling. Amanda picked up the card and examined it, her brow furrowing slightly. She then typed the number into her computer and frowned. She typed something else, then frowned deeper. "Ma'am, is something wrong?" I asked, my anxiety building. She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, moving back and forth like she was reading something she couldn't quite believe. "Could I see your ID, please?" she asked, finally looking up at me. I handed over my driver's license, my hands shaking. She studied it, then looked at me, then looked at the screen again. "You're Anita Roberts?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Anita Isabella Roberts, born July 20th, 1995. "Yes," I said, my voice wavering. "Is there a problem?" Amanda stood up abruptly. "I need to get my manager," she said. "Please wait here." "Wait," I said, my panic rising. "What's going on? Is the account in some kind of trouble?" She paused, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Roberts, this card. It's not a regular debit card," she said. "Then what is it?" I asked, my mind racing. She opened her mouth, then closed it, shaking her head. "My manager will explain," she said. "Just please don't go anywhere." With that, she hurried toward the back offices, leaving me standing at the counter with my heart in my throat and 1,000 questions I was afraid to answer. A few minutes later, Amanda returned with a middle-aged man in a gray suit. He introduced himself as the branch manager, but I didn't hear his name. I was too focused on the look on his face. He looked at me with a mix of shock and disbelief, and I knew that whatever he was about to tell me, it was going to change my life forever. "Ms. Roberts," he said, his voice calm but serious. "I'm afraid I can't cancel this card." "Why not?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Because it's not a debit card. It's an activation key," he said. "Activation key for what?" I asked, my mind struggling to keep up. The manager glanced at Amanda, then nodded. "5 years ago, your parents, Edward and Isabella Roberts, established a trust fund with our institution, a private trust, completely separate from their regular estate. It was designed to remain dormant until you personally presented this card at one of our branches." I felt a lump form in my throat as I stared at him. "A trust fund?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "How much?" The manager took a breath. $5 million, he said. The world tilted, and I felt like I was going to faint. "What?" I said, my voice sounding far away. $5 million, the manager repeated gently. "Plus 5 years of accumulated interest. The total current value is approximately $5,400,000. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like a dream that I had never dared to hope for. "My sister said." I began, my voice trailing off. "Your sister was never informed about this trust," the manager said. "It was set up in complete secrecy. Your parents were very specific about that." He then slid a sealed envelope across the counter. They also left this for you to be delivered only when you activated the trust. I stared at the envelope, my hands shaking. It was yellowed with age, and I could see my mother's handwriting on the front. For our daughter Anita, we love you. I felt a tear run down my cheek as I reached for the envelope. My parents didn't abandon me.
They didn't forget me.
They knew exactly what Valerie would do, and they protected me anyway. I opened the envelope and read the letter inside. It was from my parents, telling me how much they loved me and how they had set up the trust fund to ensure my future. They knew that Valerie was jealous and bitter, and they wanted to make sure that I would be taken care of. I pressed the letter to my chest and cried. For the first time in 5 years, I felt like I was truly loved. And I knew that I had to do something to take back my childhood home. I called Harold Johnson, my father's lawyer and close friend. He picked up on the second ring, like he had been waiting for my call. "Miss Roberts," he said, his voice warm and relieved. "Thank God you knew about the trust. I helped your father set it up. He came to me 6 months before the accident. Said he needed to protect you from Valerie. He knew what she was capable of." I sank onto my bed, my mind still reeling. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I tried," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "Right after the funeral, I called the house. Valerie answered. She said you'd moved overseas, that you wanted nothing to do with the family or the estate. She said if I contacted you again, she'd file a harassment complaint. And you believed her?"
"No," he said.
"That's why I kept trying, but every address I found for you turned out to be wrong. Every phone number was disconnected. It was like you'd vanished." I thought about those first months after being kicked out, moving from temporary housing to temporary housing, changing phones because I couldn't afford the bills, and never updating my address with anyone because I had no one to update. Valerie didn't just kick me out. She erased me. "There's something else you should know," Harold said. "The trust was designed so that only you could activate it by presenting that card in person. Your parents knew Valerie might find out about it somehow, might try to access it herself. This way it was impossible. They thought of everything." I was silent for a long moment. Then I told him about the foreclosure auction, about my childhood home about to be sold to strangers. "I want to buy it back," I said. Harold didn't hesitate. "I'll make the arrangements," he said. 2 days before the auction, Harold and I met at his office. He slid a folder across his desk. "The property details," he said. "Minimum bid is set at $350,000, but given the location and condition, it could go higher."
"How high?"
"Hard to say. Maybe $560,000 if there's serious interest." I thought about the number the bank manager had told me. $5,400,000. I could afford that. Harold nodded slowly. "You can," he said. "But Anita, I need to ask. Are you sure this is what you want? You could buy a new house anywhere. Start fresh. You don't have to face your sister." "That house is where my parents raised me," I said, my voice cracking. "It's where my mother taught me to make her chicken pot pie. It's where my father would stay up late helping me with homework even though he had work the next morning. Valerie doesn't get to take that from me. Not anymore." Harold studied my face for a long moment. "The auction is public," he said finally. "Valerie will be there. She still owns the property until the gavel falls. She'll see you." "Good," I said. "She won't take it." "Well, I know," he said. He leaned back in his chair. "Your father would be proud of you." The words hit me harder than I expected. "I'm not doing this for revenge," I said quietly. "I'm doing it because that house is part of who I am, part of who they made me, and I'm not going to let it disappear into a stranger's hands when I have the power to save it." Harold smiled, a small, sad, knowing smile. "Then let's get you ready for an auction," he said. And now, here I am, standing in the middle of the county courthouse's conference room, the gavel having just struck the podium. I've won my childhood home back, and I've finally shown Valerie that I'm not the weak, helpless girl she thought I was. As I walk out of the room, I feel a sense of peace wash over me. I know that the road ahead won't be easy, but I also know that I'm not alone. I have my parents' love and their legacy, and I have the strength to face whatever comes my way. A month later, I'm standing in the backyard of my childhood home, pulling weeds from what's left of my father's garden. The house looks different now, freshly painted in a warm cream color that my mother would have loved, with new windows that let in the afternoon light. The garden is starting to come back to life, filled with roses, tomatoes, and herbs just like my father used to grow. I hear the gate creak, and I look up to see Valerie standing at the edge of the property. She looks hollow, her clothes hanging off her frame, her hair unwashed, and dark circles under her eyes that weren't there a month ago. "Anita," she says, her voice cracking. I stand up slowly, pulling off my gardening gloves. "What do you want, Valerie?" I ask. "I need help," she says. "I have nowhere to go. No money. I've been sleeping in my car for 2 weeks." "I'm sorry to hear that," I say. "Please," she says, taking a shaky step forward. "Just let me stay here just for a little while until I get back on my feet. I'm your sister. Please." I look at this woman, this stranger with my sister's face, and I think about all the things I could say. I could remind her of the night she threw me out, of the years I spent working double shifts just to afford ramen, of every lie she told, every bridge she burned, every chance she had to make things right. But I don't, because I'm tired of carrying her weight. "No," I say, my voice calm and steady. "You're not welcome here, Valerie. Not because I want revenge, but because you've shown me exactly who you are over and over again, and I finally learned to believe you."
You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you.
"I'm just not saving you from yourself." She starts screaming, then cursing, threatening, promising that I'll regret this. I walk back to the garden, kneel down in the dirt, and resume pulling weeds. Eventually, her voice fades. When I look up, she's gone. I don't know if I'll ever see her again. I think I'm okay with that. That night, Aunt Catherine comes over for dinner. She's the only one in the family who has always believed in me, who has always been there for me. Lily comes too, with her boyfriend, and a few other people I've met along the way. My little makeshift family. Before they arrive, I hang one last picture on the wall. It's the photograph from the shoebox. Mom, Dad, Valerie, and me. All of us together one last time. Aunt Catherine notices it when she walks in. "Why did you keep that?" she asks softly. "After everything she did." I look at the photo, at my parents' smiles, at Valerie's hand on my shoulder, at the family we used to be, because it reminds me that things don't have to be perfect to be real. My parents weren't perfect. Valerie wasn't always cruel. And I'm not going to pretend the first 23 years of my life didn't exist just because the last 5 were hard. I turn away from the photo, but I'm also not going to let the past control my future. I choose who gets to be in my life now. I choose who deserves my love. Aunt Catherine squeezes my hand. "Your mother would be so proud of you," she says.
I